like this with the two. Okay.
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Focal Points. Today we have a very, very special guest. As most of you know who Dr. Kirk Moore is, with all the recent developments that have transpired in the past few weeks. But he is joining our show now to discuss what has happened and what he thinks and his thoughts on this entire debacle, where actually our own government has tried to prosecute Dr. Kirk Moore, facing 35 years in prison for protecting children from a extraordinarily deadly genetic injection that significantly shortens life expectancy, that many now classify as a biological weapon of mass destruction. So, Dr. Moore, please tell our audience a bit of background for those who aren't caught up to speed. And thank you so much for joining this broadcast.
Well, Nick, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So I'm a plastic surgeon by trade. One of the things that people have kind of given me a knock about is my lack of expertise in primary care or viruses or virology or anything. So I feel like I'll just give a little brief history. I was a flight surgeon in the Navy, taking care of primary care docs from 94 to 97, and I was moonlighting in hospitals from 94 to 2001. So I took care of anything and everything that was coming in at any given time, probably more so than what maybe other plastic surgeons and other surgeons or other specialists have had in terms of experience. So to give me a knock because I'm not a family practice doc or a pediatrician or whatever is a little disingenuous at best. I'm not a vaccine expert. I'm not a family practice expert. I'm not all that good with rashes. There's all kinds of things that you can give me a knock on, but the knock that just because I'm a plastic surgeon doesn't mean that I belong in the vaccine realm is a little disingenuous. Look, in a nutshell, I started treating people with COVID back in 2020. Vladimir Zelenko kind of made me aware that it was a bioweapon. I think he was the first person that spoke about it that way. I then followed one of your partners, Peter McCullough, very closely when he got when he got COVID. And I followed his story and his difficulty with even just sourcing hydroxychloroquine. He had to be enrolled in a study, I believe. It was kind of a crazy deal. And then that just kind of morphed into, I can't believe that we're not going to get back to normal until we stick 8 billion people in this world with a shot. When I was okay with that, as long as people still had the choice. And then in early 21, when they started mandating it, and I started having, panic calls and emails and text messages from friends and family. What am I going to do with my kids when the schools require this? My daughter has to go to college, and they're going to require her to have this COVID vaccine, which is by this point in time, even in early 21, if anybody was paying attention, we're well aware of all the problems. 700 deaths reported of VAERS in January of 21 alone, 19,000 severe adverse events. There's, Walensky and Fauci and Collins getting on TV saying, oh yeah, no, we don't see any, there's no signals that this is bad for you. When they've got a 5-alarm fire going on behind their green screen. Anyway, when they started mandating it, I felt like I had to make a choice and take a stand. And so I did. I opened up a vaccine clinic and provided saline shots to kids and cards to their parents without getting a shot. I did that for about a year and a half. In January of 23, the federal government indicted me for fraud, conspiracy, and counterfeiting. And then in January of 25, they added a charge of destruction of government property and tampering with evidence because they said that I told my office manager to get rid of the vaccine that they said they could have used at trial. All of that is fake. And then ultimately going down that road from January of 23 all the way to July of this year, we actually ended up going to trial. I was kind of hoping that the Biden administration, which was prosecuting me, would turn over to the Trump administration and they would do something about it. we kind of raised this up the flagpole at the weaponization work group that Trump had established and Pam Bondi kind of formalized. And they refused to, they basically just refused to intervene. And then after the first week of my trial, or during that first week of my trial from July 7th to the 11th, I think there was enough public outcry and enough support, and then enough people kind of, grabbing the bull by the horns, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, Mike Lee, kind of really kind of rattling the cage at DOJ. I think that got Pam Bondi to, not second guess, but I mean, at least take a second look at it and realize that, hey, this is a travesty of justice, and they dismissed the case, which was an unprecedented course of events. They've, not that I know of, have ever dropped the case in the middle of the prosecution, in the middle of the government's, trial and witnesses. They still had 2 or 3 more witnesses to go. They still had a couple of more days of testimony. But on Saturday morning, they called us and said the case had been dismissed. So that's the nutshell version.
Well, that is a spectacular story, and I, as well as thousands and thousands of other people, really do applaud you for your efforts in protecting people from these extraordinarily dangerous shots, and administering saline instead of modified mRNA that would reach their brain and their heart and cause heart and brain damage. Will have preserved so many generational lines of families. So, I really do applaud you for your heroic actions. And I think many other people also do say the same thing. And so I have a question. Would you do it again? Would you, if they roll out another dangerous injection and they mandate for people to get it, would you do it again?
I would. I don't know that the Utah Health Department and the CDC would allow me to have vaccines again. But yeah, I would do it in a heartbeat. And I'd probably be more vocal about it. I was certainly really quiet. I didn't know how the government was going to look at this. People have asked me, and I think some people have kind of given me a knock saying that I was, being unethical or illegal in what it was that I did. Look, I think the first step in the illegality here was requiring people to disclose anything about their own medical history. We have HIPAA laws that do not allow you to do that. I can go to jail for violating somebody's, personal private history. And I could lose my license for doing those kinds of things. And yet, all of that was sidestepped in order to force people to get, a COVID vaccine. And then even to walk into a grocery store, you got to show them your card. Okay. So, the illegality, I think, started first. And then on top of that, I take this, even further. Our CDC is an advisory agency only. They don't make laws. And the Utah Health Department doesn't make laws. And the New York Health Department doesn't make laws. The Texas Health Department, they don't make laws. And the CDC, as an advisory agency only, doesn't have any statutory ability to change laws. So there was never anything legal about requiring people to get vaccines. And like I said, as a matter of fact, it was illegal to require you to disclose your medical history. So it's astounding to me that this thing got flipped on its head just because the federal government says that, this is what they want to have done.
Right. Not only that, they were fraudulently authorized. They fudged all the clinical trial data. They hid a bunch of deaths, a bunch of autopsies. And so it was illegally authorized as well. And it does violate state biological weapons laws. So yeah, these injections by themselves are illegal. And yeah, don't forget forcing people to take them. It was an absolute travesty. And honestly, if more doctors did what you did, we probably would not be in such a terrible situation as we're in now, as over 70% of the global population has received these injections. Right. So, if doctors did speak up like you did and they took some action, we'd be much lower than that and in a much better situation. Now, tell our audience, what do you have to say to the DOJ? Do you have any message for them what was it like to be prosecuted by the DOJ for something like this?
Well, my main um, my the biggest thing for me is how this whole case kind of came together. Meaning, from the time that I was indicted to the time that we went to trial, everything that the prosecution did was to prevent me from telling my story. And they filed motion after motion after motion. They even filed 4 motions within a few weeks of trial starting, to further, hamstring us, basically to muzzle us. I mean, if I had to get on the stand, I was probably going to be precluded from even talking about why it was that I did it. And fraud requires intent. So, how can I give my intent without saying, hey, this is the reasons why I did it? So they filed a motion that precluded a necessity defense. When a necessity defense essentially says the patients came to me and they were scared of this vaccine. They were scared of what it was going to do to them. They'd seen results in their other family members or friends, or they'd seen things online. They'd read about it. They didn't trust it. Whatever their reason was that they were coming to me, they were coming to me for a reason. And then after me trying to give them informed consent, which you can't give when you've got a piece of paper that's intentionally left blank. You have, like you mentioned, you have 1 million doctors in the United States that basically, not all of them were given vaccines, don't get me wrong, but of those that were giving vaccines, how can you give informed consent to somebody when you've got a paper on it that says, these are the ingredients, these are the results, this is the study results, long-term, short-term, here's your teratogenic studies, your mutagenic studies, your carcinogenic studies. This is what it showed. Here are the complications. Here are the benefits, and this is the chemical formulation of it, and anything, right? And that page is intentionally left blank. So you're basically taking something out of a bottle, and you're putting it in a needle, and you're injecting it in somebody's arm, and you have no idea what it is. So you can't give informed consent. And so the prosecution's case was basically just, look. We say that the CDC had a lawful governmental function and the product still belonged to them when it was sitting in your fridge or your freezer. And therefore you were told to do it this way. And if you don't do it this way, then you are violating the law and we're going to throw you in jail for 35 years. That's what they were trying to do without any of the other extraneous things. They didn't want me to bring patients. They've already precluded me from bringing people up and asking them why they had it. They were telling me that I couldn't bring any experts, like yourself or Peter McCullough or Jim Thorpe or Pierre Corey, any of the people out there that have presented data and science and evidence about all the harms that these have done. And they weren't going to allow me to present any patients that have been damaged by the vaccine. So it was a total railroad of a prosecution. And I'm glad Pam Bondi saw it and stepped in and took it out. I mean, I think we had a decent defense, but you never know when you send it to a jury, who knows what's going to happen. So it was definitely a surprise to us in terms of how it happened. Welcome surprise. And when I met her, shook her hand, gave her a hug, thanked her. Very emotional, very genuine meeting, I felt. And here I am. So case is dropped. I'm moving on and doing whatever I can now to get these shots off the market.
Wow. Do you think this will create a ripple effect for anybody else, any other physicians that are being unfairly prosecuted at this time? Or at least, are you aware of any other physicians that are also being targeted?
I don't. I will tell you that the ones that I have heard of, whether it be physicians or nurses, a pharmacist in Chicago, those people profited from what it was that they were doing. And so they took money, not a lot. I mean, I'm sure it didn't make them rich, but, it just, in exchange of money for, the services or the product that they were being provided. That was one thing that we did not do. And, I didn't get paid for anything. It actually cost me money. I lost a lot of money doing this. Managed to keep myself out of jail, obviously. But I think a big reason why this case ended up the way it did is because I didn't commit fraud. I didn't ask people to give me money. I didn't misuse any funds. and I didn't profit in any way from it. So I have not heard of any other physicians. I don't personally know of any. I've heard people talk about it, not necessarily even just friends or people I know, but things on interviews on TV, and other people that have brought it up where they've gotten cards. They were very vague about where they got them from, and for good reason. But I think people just need to start being, I don't say more forceful, but just believe in themselves a little bit more, trust their gut instinct, and stand on the principles, and not let us think that the government is looking out for their best interest.
Right. So it seems that when the medical freedom movement or whatever movement, when there's enough advocacy and enough people speak up, this is proof that change can happen when people speak up,
Right.
particularly for something so ridiculous as this. But so now that you're free and not facing this absolutely, I would even call it like it's just so bad. I couldn't even believe that they were prosecuting for this. But now that that's over with, I think the next step now is we do have to get the shots off the market. We do have to get the shots off the market now. And that appears to be the next goal. And I know we've been speaking up for so long. So many people continue to speak up each and every day. And it gets so tiresome.
Yeah.
But for some reason, when it's coming to that, when it's coming to removing deadly products that have been linked to 500, 600,000 American deaths, it becomes nearly impossible. What do you have to say about that? How can we now move on now and try and get these injections off the market?
Well, what you and Peter and Jim and Kim Biss and Pierre Corey and all of the, I'm leaving a lot of names out, but what you guys are doing is tremendous. Okay. And what you have been doing, publishing articles, trying to open people's eyes, doing interviews, whatever it is that we can to get these stopped. That's the $64,000 question, Nick. It's scary to me how many people just kind of like fell in line and just took the CDC and our federal government at its word, and without any data, without any science, without anything, and the hubris and arrogance of our quote unquote experts, like Fauci saying that he is the science. Nobody can be the science. Okay. I mean, that's the same and tantamount to saying I am God. It's crazy. We just have to keep holding podcasts and send out messages. You and Dr. McCullough and Peter McCullough are doing a lot for, publishing things, getting things out in the open. I don't know. We got to figure out a way to get, look, it's money driven, at least at this level. And Big Pharma owns everything. Okay. They control the media. So the media is not going to do it. I mean, we've seen at times where people started talking about things, and then they're kind of like, oh no, we got to shut that down. We got to shut it down and take it off the air. All these, advertisements, if we could get, maybe one of the ways that RFK is doing this is kind of like surreptitiously saying, well, look, if Big Pharma can't, they can't market their stuff, and put their, stuff on, the mainstream media to advertise for it, maybe that'll take, a lot of this stuff and allow people to kind of speak a little bit more freely. I don't know anybody. I'm just saying my gut feeling is there's people that are on CNN, MSNBC, ABC, all the networks, Fox News, you name it, that are looking at this and they're just kind of like, God, this is just not right. People need to stick up for it. I mean, I almost lost everything. Okay. If I'd have gone to jail, I would have lost absolutely everything. I'm 60 years old. I've spent all my savings. I've spent all my discretionary income. My business was full, was failing. I was selling my assets. I was just getting ready to sell my house. Might still have to do that, and everything just to survive this. And so, the argument that people say, well, I'm just trying to save my job and just trying to keep my kids in school, or, whatever is, falls on deaf ears for me right now. And people just need to kind of, look, if you think that just because they came after me, now they're not coming after me, do you think they've stopped? No, they're going to come after you. They're going to find something. Harvey, blanking on his last, Silverglate wrote a book called 3 Felonies a Day. We're all guilty of 3 felonies a day. Okay. Just by being human beings and walking on the face of the earth. So they will continue to divide and conquer, and they will come after you unless we stop them. And the only way we stop is by standing up, pushing back, and telling them that we're not going to comply.
Right. This beast system is relentless and does not give up, and it will continue to attack us till the very end. And so we do have to keep fighting. And all those people that are in positions of power right now, that are in key positions to make important decisions, they have to stop acting like cowards and stop. Even so, say there's so many people right now in key positions in our public health agencies, in our executive branch, that believe the shots are bad and believe the shots have harmed so many people. It is time for them to actually start taking action and stop hiding, stop playing games, stop playing politics, stop rolling the dice with people's lives.
Right.
Time for that is over. And history will remember those, like you, Dr. Moore, and like many others who have spoken up, as people who got rid of these shots, because they will end up off the market eventually. They simply harm too many people. But we do hope this doesn't end up like the smoking debacle, where
Right.
they were saying smoking's great for you, and then it took them like 20 years to finally admit it can cause lung cancer. We don't want this to take 20 years. So it is time for people in key positions to finally, be brave.
Yeah.
I think that's super important.
Ron Johnson's been out there for the last 3-4 years, speaking up. Rand Paul, to some degree, although I don't know that he's ever actually called out the vaccines. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene now. We've got, Representative Thomas Massey. Nancy Mace is vaccine injured, but not saying much. Senator Mike Lee has spoken up a little bit, but you're right. I mean, people need to start really kind of pushing back and trying to, pass, legislation, get things signed. Thomas Massey presented a bill last week, I believe, to repeal the PrEP Act. That would be a huge thing. Repeal the PrEP Act. Then repeal the immunity that that vaccines have from the National Vaccine Child Injury Injury Act. Is that what it is? NCVI. From 1986. But yeah, I mean, but I will tell you, and I think if you've watched any of my stuff before, the mRNA shots could go away overnight. Okay, overnight, if RFK would sign and repeal and revoke the state of emergency in the United States. Okay, he is fully within his right to do that. Doesn't even have to mention vaccines, mRNA, COVID, nothing. He just has to say the truth. He has to speak the truth. We are no longer in a state of emergency right now. And he repeals the state of emergency and rescinds it. That's extended until 2029. How do we know that we're going to have an emergency for the next 4.5 years? We don't. And it's been done on purpose to protect the pharmaceutical companies and to keep the PrEP Act in place and to keep the emergency use authorization in place. All he has to do is repeal it, rescind it, single line. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., rescind the state of emergency that was put into place by Xavier Becerra last year in 2024, whatever that date was, and it's over. Moderna, Pfizer, they'll pull their shots off the market overnight. It'll be done, gone, because they will not be able to withstand the liability.
Yes, that is a key thing that has to happen, and I can only wonder why it has not happened. I can only wonder. Do you think the military is involved in any of this?
Well, I know they are. The contract that we had that was going to be presented at our trial was a DOD contract. So it was a fully functioning Department of Defense. They were the ones running it behind the scenes. I personally think they were the ones that developed it. They gave it to the pharmaceutical companies to slap their label on it, and then in turn, we came back around and paid them a bunch of money to buy it from them, so that then we'd have kind of plausible deniability. But yeah, the DoD was integral in all of this.
Which is so, pretty terrifying if you really think of
Right.
it. They should be protecting America, not destroying the entire population with
Right.
thousands of different adverse events. So, we gotta really do something about this. And I think the next step that is sorry, that's my cat's tail.
Cat's moving your camera around.
Yeah, he is. He is. So what needs to happen next is clearly the shots have to get off, right? And what do you think? What else do we have to do? What else is super important in these past few months, past few years? What else do we have to tackle? We know there's these self-amplifying mRNA injections. We know that that's being approved in Europe and Japan and being tested here in America. What's important up on the pipeline?
Well, I don't think mRNA has ever been proven just in general, whether it's self-amplifying or messenger RNA or modified RNA, whatever we want to talk about it. None of it's been shown to be safe or effective. The term safe or effective has been used since the late 1700s. They haven't changed that moniker for vaccines in 250 years. We just what else? We have to keep pushing. We have to give people license to speak up. The censorship, I guess the fear campaign on the other side. I mean, in other words, like the fear of reprisal for people that do speak up, and allowing people to kind of speak their mind and giving them a platform to speak their mind, and don't get the government to contract with Facebook or X or Instagram or anybody and give them license to shut people down. And then we just have to there are other docs out there, and there are other nurses out there, and there are other people out there, and they need to take the example of you guys there at the McCullough Foundation or the Wellness Company, and all of us all of us that have stood up and realized that, hey, look, in the end, we were right, and the data is going to show that we're right. So you need to come over and be right with us. And the more people that we have over here, the more the more grassroots, and the quicker that tidal wave will be able to kind of build up to kind of a mass of opposition that will change the direction of this. So there's a lot of docs out there that are just scared, and hopefully my case getting dismissed, even though it was maybe a one-off, is going to give people some strength to be able to understand that standing up for what's right can and will make a difference.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. And it needs to happen. It needs to happen. People need to speak up. And Dr. Moore, again, your story is, it'll be written in the history books. I mean, I think it's such a vital case, and it's so key that you don't have to rot in prison for 35 years.
Right.
That was huge. That was huge. So do you have any final words for our audience, any final message, and where can people follow you?
Well, I'm at the only social media that I have right now is just on my X. It's at Moore22K. That's because my other ones have been canceled. Look, stand up, push back, and do not comply. Okay, those are my words of wisdom. Stand up, push back, and don't comply.
Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. I very much appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for having me, Nick.